I think it's fitting, seeing as how we're at the Octagon at UWA, to pause just for a second before we wind up and acknowledge that none of this stuff's going to happen if we attack our education institutions. We're standing in a place that is just in the process of copping a $2.3 billion hit on its resources. It means bigger class sizes, teachers not getting paid what they're worth, staff having to work longer hours, but it also means students stumbling out with $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 worth of debt that they will carry, some of them, for the rest of their lives. This is being done by a generation of politicians for whom tertiary education, or their law degrees, their commerce degrees, were free. Is anybody here from the NTEU? Hey. Hi. We've been really proud to stand with the National Tertiary Education Union. If you don't know who they are, you should know who they are. Who've basically fronted up, and instead of just folding and being taken for granted, have fought it. And we will fight that together through this election campaign and out the other side. We don't get this future of innovation, of high technology, of clean technology, unless the next generation coming through are properly equipped to deliver that for us. So we've got to look after what we have. The other thing that's going to make it possible is telecommunications. Let's just depart from WA just for a second. Let's remember that yes, we're on an island, and no, we're not on an island. This place is all of a piece. The National Broadband Network is something we've been strongly supportive of in unprivatised form. We need a national broadband network because it's the way that you generate a large part of the economy of the future as we transition away from being an economy based on bulk, low-value commodity exports to an economy based on something rather more interesting. So that's something that we strongly are supportive of. That's global IP traffic in 2009, city to city, and it's kind of pretty. So we're hearing a lot about the digital economy. We're hearing a lot about the fact that there are more Chinese bloggers than there are people in Australia, and the fact that we're parked in the Asia-Pacific region as it lights up, as it comes online, in this extraordinary position that the NBN doesn't just connect a FIFO worker working out the back of Newman somewhere with their families in Joondalup, but it also connects them with the Chinese blogger and with the sustainable urban designer in Amsterdam. It has its dark side, but it's connecting us with global civil society in a way that's actually never been possible before. That people are meeting up. The borders of the nation states, at least in our heads, are dissolving. And that is tremendously important as we come in contact with people who are struggling with many of the same things that we are, asking a lot of the same questions as us, but under such very different circumstances. That global civil society wouldn't really be possible in the same way without the internet. It's a precious thing. Now, we all got friends in different time zones around the world. You can follow, if you want, a revolution unfolding in Tahrir Square and get to know people on the other side of the world who you might never meet and suddenly realise that your future is bound up with theirs. Of course, this thing is under threat. As it's being built, it's also being undermined and wormholed. I mean, the fact is the American military-industrial complex built the internet, and I'm starting to think it wants it back. That the tools of surveillance and entrapment that were designed to prevent people from flying aircraft into buildings and blowing up railway stations are now being turned on climate change demonstrators and the Sea Shepherds and land rights campaigners, people wanting to close coal ports because they don't favour the 21st century that the coal industry appears to be setting in store for us. It's being turned on journalists. When you deliberately confuse the boundaries between journalism and terrorism, you're somewhere scary. But that is not science fiction. That's happening now. That's the world that we are in now. And ultimately, as we discovered because of one brave whistleblower who's somewhere in hiding in Moscow, and the people who came before him, people like Chelsea Manning, who looks to spend the next 3 decades in a maximum security prison, put their lives at risk, their actual lives at risk, to bring us these truths, which otherwise we wouldn't know. The fact that these tools of surveillance aren't just being turned on terrorists and on organised criminals, the tools as they were designed to be, they're being turned on you and on all of us. And we need to do something about that. It doesn't require more transparency, friends. Some of it requires abolition, urgently. So that's another thing that we'll be working on, because of course we're always told that is in the name of security, of our security. Just wave your hand and say, because national security, and then all these problems go away. It's troubling for me as an Australian citizen, two things. I'll tell you what bugs me the most. Firstly, that ideology that says because national security. And secondly, now I've kind of lost track of how many times this has happened to me. Someone comes up and says, but yes, so what? You know, it's the Facebook generation. Privacy's dead. And anyway, I'm not doing anything wrong. So what does it matter? You know, it matters a great deal. That's the ideology of the police state. That's East Germany at the worst of times. We can't let that happen here. And what use is that in an age of climate change? Urgently redefining what we mean by security at all is probably one of the things that should be making its way to the top of our to-do list, because there's actually no military component of climate security that I can think of. You know, we're building a defence force to be fit and proper and ready for service in the 20th century. No, it's not where we live. Probably the best thing that we could do around climate security and genuine security, two things, two ideas came to mind. Firstly, can we please look after people who have already had to flee, not just trouble spots, not just economic refugees looking for an expensive cup of coffee here in Perth, but people who have fled holocausts, people who have fled war and disaster and genocide in parts of the world that aren't actually that far from here. If we can't even care for them, then we end up in Mr. Harden's lifeboat. We've already got a foot in it, and we can't afford to go there. It's a humanitarian crisis. It is not a border security crisis. The other thing that we should do, probably the single most important thing we could do to help build genuine security in the age that we're in, is increase our foreign aid. And that's something that we're pressing very heavily on. Can we manage 0.7% of the gross national income of one of, if not the wealthiest countries in the world? Well, of course we can. Of course we can. So that would be something that would build and create and generate genuine security in the age that we're in. It's not as glamorous as seeing troops off to a foreign expeditionary war, I'll give you that. The TV images aren't necessarily as good. Having been to a refugee camp on the Thai-Burma border and seeing what our aid money does, it really matters. Do you know we're the third largest recipient of our own foreign aid? That's bent. So we've got a bit of work to do. Bikes. Isn't that a sweet quote? Isn't this a deliciously subversive piece of technology? I think that is the most elegant invention of the industrial age, the bike, the zero-carbon personal fitness mobility transport device. Why don't we invent one of those? Every time you climb onto a bus or a tram, every time you walk through the park, every time you climb onto a bike, you are reducing the necessity of the US Fifth Fleet to be stationed in the Persian Gulf. It's a supremely subversive piece of technology. I'm not kidding. Every time you put in an organic garden or go to a farmer's market or put a PV panel on your roof, you're decoupling us from that industrial growth society.